If there's one man who can help, if there's one man who can help, it's the man coming in here right now.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Fullmetal Alchemist fan guide for the 2003 series, part of Fullmetal Fridays, all part of a podcast made Full Metal. Mostly I'm just kind of going through the original Fullmetal Alchemist series, if you don't know by this point. So that matches to roughly about 52 episodes if we include the movie for each week of the year, although sometimes I review a couple episodes per recording for this podcast just to keep up with scheduling because I might miss a week or two here or there, but at this point we're almost done. Usually you can expect these on Fridays around 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Today we're going to be talking about two episodes 47 and 48, Sealing the Homunculus and Goodbye. So for our synopsis for these episodes, basically there's a lot of fighting, a lot of combat, kind of reaching that climactic point of the final boss, although we might be skipping a couple homunculi, we'll see. Basically, Edward kills Sloth, and right before that, Wrath killed Lust. And meanwhile, Mustang is leading a rebellion against Bradley, finally, open rebellion against him. But while there's a battle going on with his forces and making him think that he's somewhere else on the front, near Drogma, Mustang and Hawkeye are actually trying to sneak in to the capital to try to get to Bradley's home to kind of ambush him. At the same time as this, really around the same time, Izumi decides to team up with Ed, and they also try to go after Bradley because they know that he's the next homunculi that they could easily track down. And while this is going on, they actually bring back the other Elric brothers, the fake Elric brothers. Kind of once again, we're tying in some of the earlier world-building episodes, kind of coming back to our roots again. It's kind of funny how minor characters and subplots actually do tie back, if nothing else for... I want to say it seems like a bit of a reference, just to kind of, if you've been paying attention to the series and kind of almost like a fan service sort of thing, but it kind of feels very natural at the same time too. So it's actually implemented pretty well. They're trying to kind of use the Elric's identities to try to actually, get something, purchase something, I believe. And of course, this makes them think, we're on the run, and they actually get arrested, but they get rescued by Ed. And then there's this big fight that starts to ensue with Izumi as Archer comes back as a robot, which apparently I was watching some other videos kind of leading up to this, and that's, I guess, when people bring up points of contention about the first show, like just things they were doing towards the end to wrap things up and how things might feel a little rushed, and Archer's like the big thing, like, oh yeah, and Archer, I guess, is still alive, and we're going to do something with him. We just make him a robot, and he hasn't really been saying much, so he's basically, kind of got this vendetta against Izumi specifically. So, I don't know, it's not even really clear, is he working for Bradley or is he kind of doing his own thing? Hasn't really been established, so I kind of like it, but watching it again, I will admit, it's a little off-putting, but it happens like right at the end, so it doesn't bother me too much, but I could see it being, as far as anime random stuff to happen, it's pretty tame, but yeah, it is bordering on a little silly and campy, but I don't know. The show could kind of use some of that levity. It actually, I believe it was episode 47, opened up with Armstrong, doing his little speech. So we're still kind of breaking up the humor, even as things get really, really dark with these other episodes here. As far as my overall feelings, general review for them, I'm just going to say right off the bat, I think that these episodes are both pretty much just 10s, 10 out of 10s for me. I think these are just some of the best episodes of the show. Just so much heavy drama, so much really strong emotion. It was really kind of actually difficult watching some of these episodes because, you've got two major deaths because we've learned a lot more about Lust, and she's a much more complicated character in terms of where her loyalties lie. And so seeing her get killed was a pretty big one. Wrath killed her, and then really the brothers dealing with killing Sloth, basically kind of like killing their mother again and really facing their faults and kind of dealing with their creation and really facing their mistake head on and dealing with that trauma. So there's a lot of really heavy stuff to unpack here. I liked just the conversation that Sloth has with the Elrics. It's just kind of like leaving the idea still at this point. And even after we find out, like, with the kind of what the homunculi are and what they represent is still sort of ambiguous and open to interpretation, really kind of leaves you thinking, which I really liked. As far as my favorite Full Metal moments, I really thought these episodes were both just really good in general. But I think the big one for me was kind of right after this viewing, really the conversation with Mustang and Ed, which really kind of just boiled down to with great power comes great responsibility, kind of not just about alchemy, but their responsibility as adults and as authority figures and for the government, like, they kind of making up for their mistakes. And it's like, once again, you're dabbling in things that you should really be careful with. And if you make a mistake, you have to deal with the consequences. And it kind of is tying into a lot of the other themes we've seen in the show, but I'm just kind of reminded very much of the, really in its simplest sense, the Spider-Man kind of thing. With great power comes great responsibility. But their conversation was really, I think, one of the best moments for either their characters and their particular relationship, and really just one of the best points in the show. Like I didn't remember. I remembered the conversation in the car, but it was just a really powerful scene. I also thought it was admittedly pretty dark, but really interesting how going along with what the homunculi represent and how close they are to being, the person that was almost resurrected. Are they just incomplete, which is what Al said. Maybe it is her, but just without a core piece. Or maybe she is her own being, but with all the memories of the other person, or really just the ideas and emotions of the other people and what they desire from the person. It's an interesting idea to kind of feed into that. Really, and still leaving it kind of ambiguous and how much of a person's memories. There's a great movie called Dark City, which is one of my favorite films, and it really deals a lot with that idea of consciousness and identity, and just how much it really goes into the idea of being a person, and how is it all based purely on experience, and our choices that we make, or are we just the sum of whatever memories we've had in the past and how we change them? Like what makes a person really an individual person, like the soul, the consciousness, whatever the term you want to make for it is. But that's really kind of that idea they sort of play with. And the dark turn there is that, it is kind of sad, but I forgot how menacing Sloth really is just as a character. We really get to see her perspective, and she really, really, it reminds you, this is that thing they created at the beginning from their mom. And whether you look at it as their mom incomplete, or their mom partially resurrected and just not having that connection, or just a completely new being made up of their desires and pieces for her memories, as something totally new. She does have those feelings originally for the Ulrichs, but it turned into this kind of resentment. And so it's basically their mom, or just this being, saying, she hates them for the love she has, because it's like kind of what ties her down, and she's haunted by it, like Lust was haunted by her memories. So, and that's kind of a consistent theme with a lot of the homunculi, is they're haunted by other people's lives and what they had or what they could have had, depending on your perspective. But either way, it's like there's this interesting desire to be human, but it's really just also kind of a desire to maybe it's. I think with each of the homunculi, it's a little bit different of a motivation. Some of them just kind of want to expel what was behind. It's really complicated. Like some of them might resent the people that left them behind, and maybe there's sort of a longing to be accepted, but maybe knowing you never fully will be. And Wrath deals with the same thing. And Wrath has that great line: "Is that all it really means to be human? Is to die?" Like, the mortality. And there might be something to that, because of the homunculi don't have that attachment to what particular details of their lives they make up, and those connections with other people, which admittedly are more fleeting, but the homunculi are separate from that, so they can never fully experience, I guess, that love or connection. Although, once again, is that a choice? How much of it is based on how much Dante's manipulated them? How much could they be accepted? So there's a lot of moral stuff with, once again, whether they're human or whether they're, conscious beings that should be accepted, because Ed really hates them and thinks that they are things to really kind of be snuffed out based on mistakes. But we're still toying with that idea of, can these beings be saved? Because he actually seems to be a little bit kinder and forgiving to Wrath, at least for a moment. So it's like there's a bit of a complication there, because Wrath, once again, there's a parallel to Ed, really thinks of Sloth as his mother, but really because Azumi's his mom. And oh yeah, that scene where he's like kind of afraid to go back to the gate, and we slowly see him de-age, like kind of de-aging, I guess, like going back to his baby form, and you're thinking, wow, like even and that makes it almost imply like that really is Izumi's kid, but just incomplete. But then is it really her kid? And that scene was just really, really sad because, it's on his basic level. He's just a little child wanting to be back with his mother, and his mother, you know, basically, lost the baby and then tried to, bring it back, but then also sort of abandoned it. It's like the ultimate abandonment it's of a child. And it's very difficult to deal with emotionally. Very, very heavy stuff. Like I always, obviously Fullmetal Alchemist, especially the first show, I think is just darker and it's got that personal angle. But yeah, with Sloth, it's like she just kind of hates them for those memories. It's almost like, the Frankenstein's monster, the creation resenting the creator for, basically all the abandonment and the potential for longing to not really be able to fit in. A lot of that classic stuff there, which I think I wrote an article years ago where I actually used the Frankenstein story, which is pretty much my favorite book, as a lot of those same basic classic, sci-fi ideas are really on display with trying to basically resurrect people and create life with human transmutation. It's all the Frankenstein narrative, basically. I also thought that using Sloth as one of the homunculi henchmen by Dante really added an extra layer that I didn't think about. I mean, she took under her wing her former lover's wife and the mother of his children and really helped turn her against them, and probably added to that hate for both him and for the Elric brothers. That just adds like a really nasty extra layer of just this personal vendetta, using the mother against them for her vengeance. Like, it's that stuff that's just, I think it's a little understated, some of the subtle little things in these last couple episodes, but I don't think they even come out really and say that, but that's what she did. And I mean, that's like, I know Father's a pretty evil villain, but man, that is so personal on a level that I think, not just comparing it to Brotherhood, but that makes Dante, I think, she's a really good villain, and just, I think, really still underrated. She's nasty. And like it's like everything else in the show, it's much more grounded and personal, which kind of makes it worse. It's, in some ways, it's really still this big family drama, but basically, yeah, a lot of really intense, sad moments, big plot points. And also, kind of as a final note, the actual fight with Sloth was pretty good. Mostly, not a lot of heavy action per se, but the visuals of her turning into water and then kind of breaking down slowly, and how Edward had to trick Wrath to taking the pieces of the human remnants into him and then fusing with Sloth. Just basically the subtle use of strategy I thought was really good. So that was a very satisfying fight as well. Yeah, that's pretty much it for these episodes. I mean, it's just a lot of really heavy stuff. Once again, only a couple more episodes to go. I can hardly believe it. I think I've got 3 more. So, yep, still on schedule. I'm thinking probably gonna be about maybe 2 more episodes of this. I haven't yet decided whether I'm gonna do just one next week and do the last 2 or for the final podcast, or if I will, well, not exactly the final podcast, or if I'll do 2 next week and then end with just the one, and then maybe kind of a summary of the whole show. Because after that, I'm going to do a review of the movie, because it's basically, extended episode and sequel and real proper ending to the show. And I think I haven't quite decided if I'm going to do a podcast or not for that. I might do a more traditional scripted review, also kind of to sort of review that movie as an end of the show, but also just kind of summarize my thoughts to kind of cap off the podcast. Just because, I've given a break to myself doing a lot of FMA videos this past year or more doing this. So I thought as a way to celebrate that, I'll probably do that before I dive off into other things for a while. But yeah, that'll probably be later next month, or maybe into February before I start maybe another podcast. So yeah, let me know your thoughts and feelings about these final episodes. Anything I missed, anything that comes to mind that really stands out to you. Really heavy stuff. Once again, appreciate people watching, listening, with whatever you're doing in the background. I appreciate the support. And yeah, please comment below, like it, subscribe if you hadn't. Do anything to help the algorithm, spread this around, and try to, build up more of a conversation. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening, and have a happy new year, and stay magical. All that good stuff.